Well, welcome back to the When I Heard This podcast. My name is Nate Robbins. I'm here with Pastor Joseph Tillman, MDiv, soon to be Demon. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm all right.
Cool.
I'm all right.
Good.
Hanging in there. Making it through life.
Good.
Yeah.
That's how you do it.
That's how we roll.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Until the end.
Until the end.
Which is death.
That's correct.
For everyone.
For everyone.
Except for those two guys and maybe some other people, which we'll get to. Go to Patreon. Today we're talking about death. Again, go to Patreon, $5. Like, subscribe, share, comment, follow, download. You can go to Facebook and Instagram at When I Heard This Podcast and X and Locals at When I Heard This. Tell everyone that you know about the show and ring notification bells so that you never miss this. Ever. Until you die. And also, we have a website now.
We do. This is true.
We have a whole website that got made.
It's fact.
By my wife.
And she's incredible.
Yes.
Yep. And merch.
And merch is on the website.
Merch is on that website.
So you can buy sweaters and t-shirts.
Yep.
And mugs and stickers and a bunch of other crap that you can customize.
It's not crap.
It's not crap.
It's good stuff.
It's good stuff, but yes.
Yeah.
There's a whole collection of items that you can attach the When I Heard This podcast logo to.
There you go.
Yes. And then you can see other people with those same items with their logos on it.
Right.
And you can tell them that ours are better.
Sure.
Yes. So do that.
Yeah.
Okay, more death today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again.
Was that good?
Yeah, that was great.
Was that wife approved? Yeah. Okay. All right. First question.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we talked about Enoch and Elijah having never died and having to come back to get killed by a demon later.
Okay.
But,
yes. Yeah, yes.
But we got comments from people saying that you're dumb and that everything that you said was wrong.
But that's nothing new.
Right.
That pretty much happens all the time.
And then I Googled it.
Okay.
And there's some other guy who apparently never died.
Okay.
Which I think I tried to say at the beginning or when we started talking about this, the last one.
Uh-huh.
But I didn't really know what the guy's name was.
Okay.
But Melchizedek.
Yeah, Melchizedek.
Melchizedek.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So apparently, according to Google, which take that with a pillar of salt.
Right.
Melchizedek didn't die either.
Okay.
So who he and what he do.
All right. Man, we're so smart. All right, so Genesis 14, verse 18. Melchizedek.
See?
Yeah, exactly.
You can't even read it.
I heard you say it wrong so many times in my head now. All right. Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was a priest to God Most High. He blessed him and said, Abram is blessed by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has handed over your enemies to you. And Abram gave him a tenth of everything. All right. So Abram has just returned from battle.
A tenth of everything?
Mm-hmm.
A tenth of his children?
No, not his children, but of all the things that he owned.
Mm.
Yeah. And so Abram has returned from battle, and Melchizedek greets him, bringing out bread and wine, which has its own kind of symbolic meaning that we could read into, but I won't. Brings out bread, wine, is that kind of looking ahead to communion. But he was a priest to God Most High. He blesses Abram, and then Abram gives him a tenth of everything that he has.
Like tithing.
Correct. Exactly like tithing. Yes. So, and this is pre-law. So this is tithe being established in the law of Moses.
How do you know?
How do I know it's pre-law?
No, how did he know to give a tenth?
Do it? Well, actually, tithing was a broader So tithing actually occurred in the cultural context that they were in at the time.
Oh, okay.
So that tithing was already in existence beyond just Abraham's culture, or Abram's culture, or his people. And so anyway, but yeah, so he gives 10% of everything he has. So that's literally all that we have, except for one verse in the Psalms, which speaks about Melchizedek in terms of the Old Testament scriptures.
Okay.
And then if we jump ahead, though, to Hebrews, so now if we go to the New Testament in the book of Hebrews in chapter 7, it says this: "For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of God Most High, met Abraham and blessed him as he returned from defeating the kings. And Abraham gave him a tenth of everything." So first two verses pretty much just summarize, again, what was there in Genesis 14.
Mm-hmm. Plagiarism.
Straight. First, his name means king of righteousness, then also king of Salem, meaning king of peace. So in other words, the name itself, Melchizedek, means king of righteousness. Okay. But then we also know that he was the king of Salem, which means peace. So he's also the king of peace.
Okay.
All right. And this is where it gets interesting in verse 3. "Without father, mother, or genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but resembling the Son of God, he remains a priest forever." All right. And so this is where the kind of the intrigue of Melchizedek comes in. All right.
Okay.
So he's without father, without mother, or genealogy, and having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but resembling the Son of God, he remains a priest forever.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the question is, like, who is this guy? How does he have no father or mother? How does he have no beginning of days? How does he have no end of life?
Right. So this is why Google said this.
Right.
Because he says it has no end of life.
Correct. So way to go, Google. Well done. But when we look at it, so one or two things are happening here. Okay. So there's one thought is that because it doesn't list Melchizedek's genealogy in Genesis, that the author of Hebrews is kind of using that as like because there's no genealogy listed. It's like, okay, so he's not like Abram, who has this genealogy listed of him. He's not like Noah that has a genealogy listed of him. Like, he's greater than these are, which is establishing Melchizedek's priesthood as greater than the one that would come through Abram's descendants. Okay? So be greater than the priesthood of the Levites.
Which was all the best people.
Well, I don't know what you mean by the best people.
Abraham's descendants.
Yeah. The Israelites.
Yeah.
Okay. And so in other words, is the author of Hebrews here just kind of playing on the fact that there's no mention of the genealogy with Melchizedek in Genesis. Therefore, we can just assume he has this, like, he is supposed to be like this sense of like superior than, greater than those that do have the genealogies listed.
Mm-hmm.
But we could have said the same thing about Elijah too. There's no genealogy of Elijah. Just boom, Elijah just appears on the scene. And the next thing you know, he's asking for there to be no rain. And there was no rain. All right. So, like, it's just kind of interesting, like, how writers introduce people. So that's one thought, is that, all right, he actually did have a father and a mom,
did
die. But because it's not listed or not said in Genesis, we're just kind of playing on words off of that, or playing on the, like, kind of making an argument from silence a little bit. Okay. But the other side of it would be that because he's the king of righteousness, that he is the king of peace, that he really is without father or mother or genealogy. He really is one who has no beginning of days nor end of life. And that when it talks about him resembling the Son of God, it's more than just that he's resembling the Son of God. It's that he actually is the Son of God. And so...
What?
So we refer to this as a pre-Christophany.
So Jesus
Jesus is Melchizedek.
So Jesus came in to Abraham.
Yep, came to Abraham.
Took a tenth of his stuff. And then left. And then didn't come back for
a long time.
65 million.
Yeah. Depending on how we want to date things around here.
Right.
Yeah. So
no.
That's all right. And so, but because we see other places in Scripture where it seems to be that there's a pre-Christophany. And
what does that mean?
So
that Christ came already?
Yeah, so in other words, it's the Son of God coming and appearing on earth prior to the incarnation, prior to Christ coming through the virgin birth.
Okay.
So so they're referred to as pre-Christophanies.
So he was like the guy that shows up in the Western and then helps everyone do something cool,
right? And then he's out,
just rides off,
right? Just disappears. Yeah.
Okay.
And so because it could very much be that sense that actually who Abraham came and gave a tenth to is actually the Lord.
Okay.
Yeah, because in Hebrews, the reason the author of Hebrews brings up Melchizedek is because the author of Hebrews is making the argument that Jesus' priesthood is from the priesthood of Melchizedek, not the priesthood of the Levites. So he's connecting Jesus back to Melchizedek. So in other words, all I'm saying here is that Melchizedek really was like a real dude.
Okay.
Who actually did have a father and a mother, did actually die at some point.
Or he was Jesus, who did die at some point.
He was Jesus. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I tend to side with the pre-Christophany camp on this one.
No, you don't.
Okay. But I do.
Okay, well, that was like a catch-up from last episode, because Google. But let's keep going.
All right.
Is it possible to communicate with dead people?
Sure seems that way.
Because Jesus is dead.
No, well, yeah, but he rose, remember?
Okay.
Yeah, so he's alive. So No, but actually there's a passage in Scripture that talks about someone actually communicating with the dead.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to go to 1 Samuel 28.
It was after Jesus died and all the dead cool people came and walked around and whatever happened.
No.
Did people talk to him?
I mean, that would be kind of cool, but they wouldn't be dead anymore.
Didn't a bunch of dead people come back to life?
Yeah.
Or not to life, or their spirits walked around or something?
Yeah.
Did anyone talk to them?
I mean, it seems like that's... Yeah.
Okay, so it is possible to communicate with dead people.
Okay, but... All right, so outside of like zombies walking around or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Or in this case, people that actually rose from the grave and that kind of thing. So, but let's talk about like someone actually communicating with the dead in the sense of like communicating with them through like what we think of as like, you know, conjuring up the spirit world.
Okay.
All right.
Cool.
So in chapter 28 of 1 Samuel, okay, Samuel has actually died at this point.
Okay.
All right, so he's dead. And King Saul...
He died in his first book?
Yeah.
What's the second one about? Is someone talking to him dead the whole time in the second one?
No.
Okay.
It's not like a whole book of communicating with the dead. No, it actually has nothing to do with Samuel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's weird.
It is kind of strange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Worst sequel in the Bible.
Well, maybe just mistitled would be maybe
there. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. So in 1 Samuel, all right, so 28, Saul visits a necromancer at Endor. Okay. This sounds like
with the Ewoks,
right? This kind of sounds like some crazy stuff happening. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so he goes and she asks, who is it that you want me to bring up for you?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, this is in verse 11 of 28, bring up Samuel for me, he answered.
This is Saul.
Mm-hmm. This
Okay.
is King Saul. And when the woman saw Samuel, she screamed. And then she asked Saul, why did you deceive me? You are Saul. So, in other words, she didn't know who it was that was asking this of her.
Oh, okay.
And so, but the king said to her, don't be afraid. What do you see? And this is what she says. I see a spirit form coming up out of the earth, the woman answered. And then in verse 14, Saul then asked her, what does he look like? And she said, an old man is coming up, she replied. He's wearing a robe. And then Saul knew that it was Samuel. And he knelt low with his face to the ground and paid homage.
Didn't they all have robes? Didn't everyone in the Bible wear robes?
There was a lot of robes being worn. Yeah. So for some reason, he knew it was Samuel. And verse 15, why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? Samuel asked Saul. And then Saul replies, I'm in serious trouble. And so I am in a bad way. I need help from my guy, but you're dead. And so this is what he says. He says, the Philistines are fighting against me and God has turned away from me. He doesn't answer me anymore, either through the prophets or in dreams. So I've called on you to tell me what I should do. And Samuel answers, since the Lord has turned away from you and has become your enemy, why are you asking me? The Lord has done exactly what he said through me. The Lord has torn the kingship out of your hand, given it to your neighbor David. You did not obey the Lord and did not carry out his burning anger against Amalek. Therefore, the Lord has done this to you today. The Lord will also hand Israel over to the Philistines along with you. Tomorrow, you and your sons will be with me, and the Lord will hand Israel's army over to the Philistines. So,
Okay.
So
was it actually Samuel?
And that's the great question.
Because in horror movies, every time someone tries to talk to their family member,
Uh-huh.
it's always a demon.
Always a demon.
They're like, that's not really your grandma. That's a demon.
That's just a demon.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the question is like, is he really talking to the spirit of of Samuel, or is it just this demon that's appeared and talking to him?
So no one knows.
I mean, it's one of these great questions where you're just like, well, I don't know what to make of this.
Okay.
It could very well be that he actually called up, Samuel from the dead, and actually spoke to his, to his spirit.
But it sounds like he didn't actually see him.
Yeah, it's more like just words are being said.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he was kept asking her what he looked like.
Yes. Well, and that's true. But she said, I see a spirit form. What does he look like?
Yeah.
Old man coming up. But then he hears like Samuel speaking. Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, and it's one of these things that's like so strange that the fact that Samuel does seem to be having a conversation with Saul.
But all he says is, hey, you're going to die tomorrow. And so is everyone that you know.
Well, yeah, you and your son.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but how does he know that? It's almost like it's Samuel still prophesying. Because that's what he was a prophet.
Or it's a demon.
Or it's a demon. I'm willing to go either way on this one.
So the answer to the question is, you don't know.
The answer to the question is
this the only time in the Bible that this happens?
Yeah, but there's other times where they're told not to go visit necromancers or not to get involved in necromancy. So
okay,
yeah,
because it's evil power, not good power.
Yes, I think that's probably a fair way of looking at it. Yeah, like it's always labeled in the context of like this is sin.
Okay.
Yeah, like don't do this. Like it is sin, or as your friend, or like you're saying, it's evil.
So you do funerals at church.
I do.
Okay. What is that like? And how does that go?
You know, on one hand, it's one of the greatest gifts I feel like that I'm able to give to people, and considering it an honor to be with them when loved ones are passing away or have passed away.
Okay.
Because, when you're with people, like as people are passing or after they have passed, it's, like often they're kind of looking at the pastor or the priest as, like really like representatives of God.
Mm-hmm.
Like almost like they feel God is near them or with them or walking with them through this because the pastor or the priest is there.
Okay.
And again, I'm not trying to make any kind of like equation of me being godlike or any of these kind of things. I'm just saying that's kind of the way people. So it's almost as if it's not about me specifically, like my name or who I am. It's more like my role, my function as a pastor or a priest, that I'm actually getting to walk alongside people during this journey. So it's a gift, but obviously it's very emotional for them, for me. But again, it's a gift to walk them through this time of grief and the process. You're asking about the process.
What's that like? What do you have to do?
Yeah, it really differs on every individual.
Okay.
In terms of, was the passing sudden or not? Was it expected? Was it not expected? And then depending on the situation, emotions are really high.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say you've got someone and you're doing the funeral for an individual that everyone feels like good, like, okay, they know the Lord. They've lived a quote unquote long life. So let's say they're in their 80s and they've passed away, and so some people may think that's like a gift that they've actually been able to pass away, go be with the Lord. And so obviously their family is going to miss them and they grieve, but it's a very different grief and very different emotion than someone who passes away suddenly and it's seen as like a premature death.
Okay.
Like, someone suddenly passes away of a heart attack and they're in their 40s or 50s or 60s. Like, that's jarring. Someone passes away in the line of duty. Obviously every time a first responder or law enforcement is involved, and just in their day-to-day work, they know it's a chance, but still it's jarring when it actually happens. And then of course, obviously the if you have an individual that's a young person or even a child that passes away, that emotion is completely different. And therefore the process is completely different than someone who, again, is deemed as they've lived a full life, they're older, they're ready to go. Or even someone who's been battling an illness, and they may be a little bit younger. Maybe they're in their 50s or 60s, but they've been battling an illness, and they're just ready. They're ready to go be with the Lord. Obviously, the family is upset about it, but they're ready to be with the Lord. And therefore, the funeral, though, and what I'm saying in all of this is, because of the way the situations are different, the funerals become different.
Okay, so someone dies at your church.
Yep.
What do you got to do?
So they've passed away. Then if I wasn't already there when they passed away, then I'm setting up a time to go visit the family, like ASAP, to sit down and talk about what do they want in the funeral, like what scriptures, what songs, I present them like a general outline of how funerals generally go. And then I also use that time to hopefully, if I can get together with family members, then I can listen to them tell stories about the individual who's passed away. And then that kind of helps me get an idea of the things that are important to the family to be communicated about that person. Because I might have a working knowledge or have a relationship with that individual, but if I can convey things from the perspective of a spouse or a child or a grandchild, then that's obviously much more meaningful to them. And so, it's meeting, it's meeting with the family, then it's putting together the actual flow of service. It's communicating with the funeral home of, hey, here's the, like if the funeral's happening there at the funeral home, here's the outline we want to work with. So you work with the funeral home with that. And then families have to make decisions on, are they going to be buried, are in a casket, or are they going to be cremated? Does that determine a difference in graveside? Is graveside happening the same time as the funeral, or is it at a different time? So there are different variables at play as well in that. But for typically it's, viewing, funeral, graveside. And those are like the functions, if you were, that I would be present at and be present at the viewing, and then obviously leading the funeral and the graveside.
And then the after party.
Yeah. And then there's, I know at our church, there's just food galore. Like our church provides a meal for the family. And so, and we'll bring it to, our church will provide it at the house of the family if that's preferred, or if the service is there at the church, or they want to come to the church after the graveside, then we provide a meal there. And it's a huge spread. And I'm so grateful for those in our church that put the time, the energy, the effort to put all this together. Because some of our ladies will actually even take off work to come and make sure that the meal is ready. And so it's a pretty awesome labor of love. And kind of like it's just another gift to the family. So yes, that's pretty much it. And then for my part on that end, then it's just kind of following up with the individuals, with the family members after the individuals passed. So
okay, so we said we'd talk about this last time.
Okay.
All right. So how long should Christians be sad about a dead person that they loved?
Why are you using the adjective Christian?
What do you mean?
Like, in other words, does it differ between a Christian and a non-Christian?
I don't know.
How people should grieve?
I don't know.
Okay.
Are you talking about the alive people or the dead people? Because I was going to bring that up actually too.
The alive people. Like, in other words, so if I've had someone that's just passed away.
Yeah.
And therefore, are you saying there's maybe a difference between the way the Christian would grieve versus the non-Christian?
Well, we talked about that, but like how long?
How long?
That's why I'm asking.
Okay.
But to add to last time,
okay,
if a Christian was, if a non-Christian died that a Christian person loved, I understand crying for that.
Okay.
Because they're not having a good time.
Right.
So
sure.
But like if a Christian person dies,
okay,
and a Christian person who's alive loved the Christian person, that Christian person that died is having a great time.
Sure, absolutely.
So don't get why you're crying there.
Okay.
But if they went to hell, you could cry.
Right.
Because that sucks.
Right.
Right?
Okay. Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Okay, so that's why I said if Christians die, like...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that makes sense. Okay. So for individuals that pass away, so let's say they're a Christian. We know they've gone to be with the Lord.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm a Christian. Know they've gone to be with the Lord.
Yes.
It would be perfectly normal. Like, I guess it depends on the relationship with the individual. Okay. So like if it's a spouse, okay, or it's a child, or it's a, of mine, or it's a parent of mine. I think all those will play into a little bit of a difference.
Okay.
Because let's say I'm a Christian and my elderly parents have passed away to go be with the Lord. Like, I'm still going to grieve and cry and miss them. Okay. And I'm crying not because of where they are, because I know they're with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
I'm crying because I will not hear their voice again on this earth. I'm crying because I can't pick up the phone and go talk to them. I'm crying because I won't be able to go, and like, for example, in my case, drive to the farm and sit down and talk with them. Right. Like, so like there's a sense of deep, like, missing someone. Like,
okay.
And, and we're told as Christians that, we do not grieve as the world grieves,
mm-hmm.
because the world has no hope.
Right.
And so we grieve, but we grieve with hope. Right. So in other words, I'm grieving the loss of a parent. I'm grieving the loss of not being able to talk to them, for them not being able to see certain events in my kids' lives, wishing they were there for that.
So how long should that last?
Like you can have like real deep grief, whether it's for a spouse, a child, a parent, a sibling, for 3 to 5 years. Like I'm not saying like
that. What?
Yeah. Like, I'm not saying like paralyzed grief. Okay.
Okay.
But what I am saying, like, but like grief in the sense of, hey, their name is brought up, they cry. A story is told about them, they cry. Something reminds you of that person, you cry. Like, that's 3 to 5 years is considered in the in the psychological counseling world like a normal length of grief.
For everyone?
No, it can differ. All I'm saying, that's like up to.
Okay.
So some people may grieve that way for 6 months and then not so much anymore. Or I think what's probably most common is like the first time of something that happens. So for example, you've got a loved one that passed away. The first time they're not at Christmas. The first time they're not with you at Thanksgiving.
Oh.
Their first time, like if it was a spouse, that first anniversary that they're not there with you. Their birthday. Like all those first that come up for that first year can be really difficult for people. And I know people that really have a hard time with grief for really 2 to 3 years. If they've been with someone, especially they've been, married to someone for a long time, or maybe if it was just a sudden loss. And goodness, to lose a child, that's a whole different can of worms, right? Because now we've lost a child. Even if we know that child, if they were old enough and when they knew the Lord, or it was before the age of accountability, and we know they're with the Lord anyway. But so that's what I'm saying. I think when we talk about it as Christians, like, yeah, we have hope we're going to see them again. Like, that's the joy. That's the hope. That's the reason I'm not into a full-blown depression over this, right?
Okay.
That's the reason I can.
So the difference between Christians and non-Christians and grief is full-blown depression and...
No, I'm not saying that.
Kind of sad at Christmas.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we grieve like the world grieves, but there is an assurance, but we're going to see them again. Like, therefore, in other words, like I'm not just trapped, lost, thinking, oh my gosh, the grief is so acute that it's lasted now beyond 3 to 5 years, and I've still not gotten over it. But I'll say even Christians fall into that trap. I've seen it happen before, where you encounter someone that's just incredibly bitter and incredibly angry, and can be angry at God because they feel like God took their child from them. And so I just think there's a lot of variables in this. There's not like a right or a wrong. I just know that from a counseling perspective, once I get past 3 to 5 years and there's still like really acute grief, really acute anger, we are really in an unhealthy space for that person.
Okay.
Yeah, their soul is in an unhealthy space. So
what do I not get?
I don't know. You tell me. What do you think?
I don't get it.
What are you not getting? The grief part?
I don't get it.
So
I am married.
Sure.
If my wife died, she would immediately go to the best place ever.
Correct.
So why would I be crying for very long?
Because
why would I cry about her being in the best place ever? If I was crying, it'd be for me. Correct. Because I can't.
Yeah.
Like, she won't be here.
Correct.
But that shouldn't last very long, right?
I think it really differs from person to person.
This is what I don't understand.
Yeah. Like, it really differs from person to person.
Okay.
Yeah. I like, okay. So for some people, yeah, they'll be able to move on quicker than others. I just don't want to sit here and tell you that there's a right way or wrong way or right length of time to grieve.
Okay.
But you also understand what I'm saying about the distinctions between, like, I think there's a big difference between an elderly parent passing away or grandparent passing away versus and even an elderly spouse passing away, right? Versus a child that we deem, like, I don't know if it would even matter how old we were if we would lose a child, you know?
Right.
And, you know, I think that, you know, those kind of things are heartbreaking, you know?
I just feel like I'd be thinking about, like, well, she doesn't have to go to work anymore, which sucks, which is the majority of our day.
Right.
She doesn't have to put up with me anymore, which sucks half the time, I think. And she's in the best place ever,
right?
Getting to watch me fumble around and do whatever I'm doing.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah. Okay. So, like, all right, for me, and I can only speak for me.
Okay.
I can only speak for me. Like, so when I have a parent that passes away, and if they're not able to make it to my kids' graduations, they're not able to make it to my kids' weddings, right? Like, that's a loss. Okay. And I'm not saying it has to be this intense amount of grief, depending on the timing of when these things happen. All I'm just saying is that when we grieve, yes, we have hope. We know we're going to see them again, but yeah, we're going to miss them at the things that we would have preferred for them to be at, you know? And I think that's perfectly normal. I think that's part of the human existence. I mean, even when Mary approaches Jesus and says, Jesus, you could have saved my brother, but you didn't. And Mary just cries. Like, where were you? And Mary just cries. Well, what does Jesus do? He weeps, right? Shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus weeps. And so he cries with her. And so even Jesus, the Son of God, who knows he's about to raise Lazarus from the dead, knows her brother will not even remain dead, cries with her.
Okay.
So grieving, crying, is one of the most natural human emotions that we find all throughout Scripture, and we find even with the Son of God himself. And where he's weeping there, and he's weeping with Mary, he's weeping with the one who's grieving and crying. Like, I think that's just Jesus getting down on our level with us. And he knows that he's about to raise this man from the dead, and he's still crying. And I think that's kind of the point. It's like, I know I'm going to see my family members again if they know Jesus, right? I know that. But I'm I'm also going to cry and I'm also going to grieve. And again, different people will do this in different ways for different lengths of time. And some of them will be sad, some of them will be mad, some of them will be a combination of both. It'll be across the spectrum. And I just think that's all part of, again, just the human experience and the human existence as we're walking this earth in our brokenness. Christ walks with us. And so, yeah, I've got hope, but I still grieve. And I think it's perfectly fine to be in that place.
I feel like I'm missing something.
And I get it. I do understand, especially if someone's been suffering and they're not suffering anymore. Man, we're thrilled about that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just saying, like, there's, for some people, that we're going to grieve, you know, the loss of a loved one because they're not there, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's
I guess it's just hard for me to, like, in my brain, not see how the positives outweigh the negatives.
Yeah, but we have emotional responses all the time that have nothing to do with the factual logic of things.
Right. Okay.
And so all I'm saying is I think there's emotional responses like grief, like crying over the loss of a loved one that has nothing to do with the logical fact of they're in a better place, which is factually true, or the logical reality that we're going to see them again, which is factually true. But it's just our own emotion. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Jesus validates that when he cries with Mary.
Okay, to lighten it up. Buried versus cremated.
Yes, sir.
Christians have different feelings about these things for some reason.
They do.
And there's a debate over whether Christians should get buried or cremated.
Mm-hmm.
I think being buried takes up too much space, and eventually the entire world is going to be graveyards. Okay. But that's my take on it.
All right.
Therefore, I want to be cremated. Also, if God's going to bring me back to life, I want it to be like, yeah, this is a miracle. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like he's going to have to
really work some magic stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So, buried versus cremated from Christian perspective, what do you got?
Okay. I personally do not think it matters.
Okay.
That if you're buried in a casket or if you are cremated, I honest to God do not think that it matters.
Okay.
Because here's the reason why. It has no bearing on our resurrected body or our resurrected life.
Okay.
And that has kind of been the argument.
That it does?
That, in other words, that we're going to be like, our body's going to be raised up. But we, like, if you think through it logically, you realize, well, that's just not true.
Your body's either going to...
Because it's going to be decomposed. Right? Or let's say that you were in war, you know.
Oh, right.
or you died in a fire, or, you know, like whatever.
Yeah, cremated.
Like, yeah. I mean, like, so I honestly don't think that it matters one way or the other.
Okay, so the people who do think it matters, why do they think it matters?
Again, I think there's the understanding of attaching the body to what's going to happen with our glorified body after the resurrection. But again, that there's just no direct correlation to that. Like, in other words, it's not like if we don't have if our body's been cremated, oh well, you don't get to have a resurrected body. Like, that's not the way this plays out. And so biblically, theologically, I don't think there's a leg to stand on there. There's others that may say that you shouldn't do unnecessary damage or harm to a body. But the reality is, if a body is being buried in a casket, there's still decomposition that's going to happen over time.
Yeah.
And so, you know, like the phrase, you know, from dirt you came, to dirt you will return.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
might as well speed up the dirt process.
right. I mean, I'm being honest. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so I honestly think that if individuals have a take on it, they should remove a biblical stance from that. Because I don't think there's a biblical stance on it.
Oh, okay.
I think they should rather say, it makes me personally feel uncomfortable.
To be burned?
Yeah, to be cremated.
Okay.
Yeah. Because there are some that just, that kind of weirds them out. And I wish they would just say that weirds me out rather than that's not the right thing to do.
Rather than you're going to be a clump of dirt in heaven while I'm a whole body.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, because it has more to do with the Christ's second coming, establishing of new heaven and new earth and new creation and the resurrected bodies. It's more connected with that than it is the idea of heaven. But anyways, I won't get into all that. So I just think it really doesn't matter.
Okay, so there's people that wish they were dead.
Okay.
Not there's from I'm not having a good time to I'm full blown suicidal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you say to those people?
Oh, that are on like the
whole spectrum.
Okay, from the whole spectrum. You love the word. And for those that are saying, if it's just like the passing thought of this is a crappy day, I'm ready to get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
Is that a sin to think that?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think we all have those thoughts from time to time, so I don't think it's a sin. And then you've got people that, let's say, they're not wanting to take their own life, but they're suffering with an illness, sickness. Then they're ready to go. Just like if the Lord wanted to take them whenever it was, they would be ready for that.
Okay.
And I think and personally, because that happened with me, that's where I got to with my pancreatitis. I completely think that's okay too.
Okay. What if it's an all day, all the time thing?
Yeah. So
if I'm sick and all I want to do is die and it's making me die.
Yeah.
Because I'm not doing things
that you should,
or I'm just bringing myself down.
Yeah. And you do see that that's a real thing. And I think you got this, some people that, that's just kind of where they're at, and they're just ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
And they've really, to be honest with you, really just given up hope, that things are going to ever change or even better, or they start really getting to the idea, the question of, well, why am I here? And sometimes the reality of things will not get better is true. In other words, that physically things are not going to get better, and so I completely understand that. But I would, because the Lord knows our days and our times, and I guess I would want to encourage people or talk with people, share with people, hey, but you are here, and I know it can feel like why, and I know it can feel like you're just trying to use all of your energy to survive, and so therefore I'm just tired of the struggle, and I'm just tired. I get that, the sense of I'm just tired, and I'm just ready to go be the Lord. But when that's the thought, every day, all day, I guess I would say, but there's, I don't want to talk to this people but where is purpose even in the midst of all of this?
Okay.
But very empathetically, where might God have purpose for you in this reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where is purpose, and where's what part can you still play in this new reality that you're in, this new normal you're in? Where is that? Where's the purpose? What's the new part I can play? Who are the people that I'm close with, that I'm with? I think there's a lot of other things to kind of consider, look at, think about. And I'm not saying it's easy when you're in pain all the time.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in pain all the time, you're in pain all the time, and it sucks. And so, like, and it does. And then, then you get on the pain meds, and they don't help your mental and emotional state at all. Most of them drop you emotionally. And so it's almost like this vicious cycle you get in. And so but again, I would want to try to encourage people but there's let's find something here, right? Then you've got those that I think are like at the full blown end of complete hopelessness, and they're ready to take their own life. And again, the hopelessness can be for whatever reason, but they're just fully hopeless. I mean, that's, to me, when individuals take their own lives, that's what has had to have happened, right? Like, in other words, there's hopelessness.
Oh,
yeah.
Hopelessness must have been the reason.
Okay. Yeah. So when people take their own lives, that hopelessness was the driving factor behind it. Okay, I was suffering, or I was sick, or my circumstances are terrible, or these things happen relationally, or I've experienced loss and grief, but those will all be there. But behind all that is this hopelessness, and I think that's there in that hopelessness that you're really wanting to reach out to people and say, but I kind of going back to that kind of first thing, where's your purpose? Where's your what part is in this new reality? Can we come to terms with this new normal, or this new circumstance? Can we come to grips with the reality of this situation? And then can we find purpose and hopefully some sense of joy in that, even in the midst of whether it's chronic pain or deep loss, or horrible circumstances. Find again a source of meaning and purpose. So those are all the things I'm thinking of, but I'm also very empathetic toward people who find themselves in those places.
Okay, what would you say to people who are afraid of dying?
Wow, I would say you're not alone. I think a lot of people are afraid of dying.
Okay.
And especially if you think that the end of life is just it, right? Like we have, like, the only life we have is on this earth, and when it ends, over. Like, yeah, there's people who fear death because of that, because then life really is just over.
So if someone comes to you and says, I'm constantly afraid of death, what do you tell them?
Okay. Well, I think there's the one person, they think when death comes, that's it. There's the Christian who comes, they're gripped with fears about death. They're hoping there's going to be an afterlife. They're hoping that's what they read in their Bible. That's what they will actually even tell people, I'm going to heaven. But then in their heart, they're wrestling with the reality of that. Like, they're afraid of it. And there are people who actually know I'm going to heaven. Like, they actually know that, and are still afraid of dying because they're afraid of leaving, what this is. They're afraid of leaving what is behind, and what they've known. And so I guess for me, it's first, like, figure out kind of where they are in this. Like, why, like, where is that fear stemming from? Is it the fact of, I just don't think there's going to be anything after this? Or I say I'm a Christian. I actually believe I'm a Christian, but I'm really having a hard time with the fact that there really is heaven. Or is it, hey, I really believe there's a heaven, but I just don't want to die. I'm afraid of it. Well, I think the conversation is different with all three of those people, and so but I also, again, I get the fact that being afraid of death is a real thing. And I don't really know how to, if I'm being honest, I don't know how to push someone into the reality of knowing, like, to being settled in their hearts that it's okay to die.
Okay.
I don't know how you lead someone there, to be honest with you, outside of saying, hey, let's talk about what Christ has promised. Let's talk about what Christ has said. We know Christ. We put our hope and our trust in Christ. Therefore, we're believing that what he says is true. That if he says that he's gone to prepare a place for us in John 14, he's gone to prepare a place for us. If he tells us in 1 Corinthians 15 that victory has been had over death, then we trust that victory has been had over death, that in that same passage of 1 Corinthians 15, we are going to be raised up, with him. And so, like,
as clumps of dirt.
As clumps of dirt. So I do believe that there's the ability to, like, try to reaffirm the promises of Christ and the promises of his word into our hearts to help us overcome fear. But for some people, it's just going to take them actually getting to a point of maybe where they're like, you know what? I was afraid of death, but now that I'm here, I'm looking at it, I'm staring at it, I'm okay. Or I'm ready. And I remember when my grandfather's passed away, I remember him telling me on the phone, he just said, Joseph, I'm ready to go. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm just ready. And I, to be honest with you, I'm in my early 20s, and like that was a hard thing to wrap my head around. Like, why would you just be ready to go? Like, don't give up. They were just ready. And same thing with my pancreatitis. Like, I just got to a point where I was just ready, and I haven't feared death since. Like, when it happens, it's happened. But sometimes I think you have to kind of face it to be able to overcome certain fears of death. So the promises of Christ, and then for some people, it's just going to have to be them facing it. And now I think there's a difference if you're facing it and you're still covered up in fear. Then let's talk about where that fear is stemming from and try to replace that fear, if you were, with the promises of Christ.
So if someone was dealing with the death of someone close to them right now, what would you say to them?
Oh, baby. That we all grieve loss differently. Mm-hmm. And that it's okay to grieve loss. That some need to be alone when they grieve. Some need to be with people when they grieve. Some people will grieve for a short time. Some people will grieve for a long time. Some people will be angry. Some people will be mad. Some people will be both. And I guess there's just no one right way to grieve. And so if
I wanted to grieve by killing people and blowing stuff up, is that okay?
Absolutely not. There are healthy ways to grieve.
Okay.
Yeah. And we need to find healthy ways to grieve. Healthy ways to grieve can be, I need to go be with people that knew that person like I did, tell stories about them, and us cry together. Mm-hmm. For some, it can be, hey, you know what? I just need to go off and be alone. And it could be for a day, it could be for a week, whatever it may be. I need to go visit some of the places that I visited with this person before and just grieve their loss, and that we won't go visit those places again. Mm-hmm. There are so many healthy ways to grieve. And I think, we never want to call grief itself unhealthy.
Okay.
Grief, I mean, it can become unhealthy if you're doing it in manners you're talking about, right? It can become unhealthy if it just, if you're still just like in a depression or just angry 3 to 5 years later, or like 5 years later, let's say, like, yeah, it can become unhealthy. It can become unhealthy at that point. But there's so many healthy ways to grieve. There's people that grieve with counselors. Like, there's actually, like, you've heard the phrase grief counselors, but there's mm-hmm. like professional counselors that really can help individuals walk through not just stages of grief, because when we talk about stages, that seems very like stage 1 to stage 2 mm-hmm. to stage 3, but actually walk through the journey of grief, I think, is a much better phrase. And so there are professional counselors that I recommend to people. as a pastor, I sit with people who are dealing with the grief of a loved one,
Mm-hmm.
and I just let them share stories and talk about them. And sometimes it's just me listening. And so I think for people who are grieving, sometimes they just need to find the people who maybe don't know that person, but can I tell you about them? Can I tell you why they meant so much to me?
Mm-hmm.
Can I tell you about the times that we had that were great? Can I tell you about some of the times we had that we fought or that, we didn't get along? The times where we laughed. And let me just share with you about who this person was. Those things are all really healthy things to do. And so I just think there's a lot of healthy ways we can grieve. There's even grief support groups, that you can go to, and where they're grieving the loss of, and it could be, there's support groups for people who've lost, people to cancer. There are support groups for people who've lost people like for law enforcement, agents, or officers, for their wives or their husbands, their spouses, to be able to go to if they've passed away. And so there's these different groups that can actually help work through the grief too. So there's even individual places where you can grieve together because you've lost someone because of dementia or Alzheimer's. And so I think all of these things that are out there are actually really good. And hopefully they become healthy outlets for us to grieve. And they're allowing us to grieve kind of as we are. But then you also do hope there's a sense of finding hope in that too, or finding solace, and not that you feel a grief diminishing per se, but maybe immediately, but maybe you would over time. That over time you'd find yourself being able to tell that story that you never could tell without crying. You now can tell that story without crying. That memory, that sight, that smell, whatever it may be that you've attached to that person you lost, now you can encounter that sense again, but it not overwhelm you with grief. And I think healthy modes of grieving allow us to get to that point. And again, the goal is not to just remove that person from our memory bank or get over them. I think that's a bad way of phrasing it. Oh, you'll just get over it. I think that's a horrible way of phrasing it, and so, but I do think that there's the ability to, again, tell stories. What's interesting is, so I'm in this group of older gentlemen that meet on Wednesday mornings, and they're all retired guys. I'm the youngest one there, obviously, and they're all retired guys, and so they've lost spouses, they've lost children, they've lost parents, they've lost siblings. And when you listen to them be able to talk and to share, and we have it on different ends of things. We've had opportunities for people to share about losing someone, and they can do it without much emotion. And in other words, they're just, let me share with you about when I lost my parent, or when I lost my spouse, or when I lost my child. Mm-hmm. They're able to share that story and really, create a memory, and it's awesome. And we've had other people who've cried for the very first time in our meetings because they felt the safe space to be able to grieve with other people. Not that they haven't cried alone, but it's the first time maybe they've cried with other people. And I think that's just a beautiful thing, that you can all be there together in doing that. But you see these people in these different places and their journey of grief. And I think for a lot of people, it gives a lot of them, they have hope, because they can see the fact of, oh, I don't have this. The grief won't be this intense forever. Mm. I will grieve to a degree. I may even have tears from my eyes, but it won't be that intense. And there is a healing to be had. So, So I think if you've lost a loved one, then find healthy ways to grieve. Would be my encouragement.
Well, that was the most up and down roller coaster episode. I probably should have put these questions in a different order.
Yeah.
And either front loaded the sadness or back loaded the sadness.
It's okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll say this. You probably noticed that I got a little choked up.
Yeah.
In it. So I'm, so personally for me, I'm going through my own journey of about to lose a loved one, and so the topic obviously hits close to home, and so talking about it sometimes brings out emotion. So that's why you saw that. So
no emotions over here.
They will balance each other out.
Go to Patreon, $5. Like, subscribe, share, comment, follow, download. You can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at When I Heard This Podcast, and X and Locals at When I Heard This. Tell everyone that you know about the show. Ring the notification bell. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Nate Robinsoff, and you can follow Joseph on Instagram at
RevJoT.
This has been the When I Heard This Podcast, and we will see you guys next time.
Bye.